into the ground, and that would be a stall that was happening because there was not enough lift over the wings to sustain flight because the flaps had been retracted early.
So it looked to you as if it was coming into land when what it was supposed to be doing was literally taking off, having left the ground just seconds beforehand.
Yeah. Yes, so we know it was in the air for about a minute. When a plane takes off, within 15, 20 seconds, undercarriage is retracted. And then over a period of 10 to 15 minutes, the flaps and slats are slowly retracted as it increases speed. Now, in this, as I said, in this one, it's a minute into the flight and the undercarriage is still down, but from the vision that I have seen, it appears as though retracted. Now,
way faster than they ought to be, based on your explanation, Jeffrey.
And if you retract the flap time of flight, and you have a stall, and down you go.
Okay, that's a really the beginning of our conversation. There are around 1,100 of these aircraft, this particular 787-8, in service around the world. Up until now, it's had a perfect record.
Yeah, look, there's three models. There's the 787-8, and there's about 400 of those. There's the 787-9, and there's about 700 of those. And there's a few hundred of the 787-10s. It's the same basic aeroplane, just different lengths. British Airways is a very big operator of them, Virgin Atlantics. I mean, it's an aeroplane around the world. They operate essentially flawlessly. They did have some battery issues very early on, Japan Airlines and All Nippon, with a runaway lithium battery issue. But that was a very early on problem, and that was rectified back in 2011. Since then, they've been giving perfect service. Boeing did have some production issues in North Carolina, their plant. That was a few years ago. But this aeroplane was built well before that. It was built at Everett in Washington back in, I think, 2011, 2012. So it's not part of that particular issue. But mind you, that was a production issue which was fixed, so that wouldn't be a problem either. So, you know, everybody thinks the 787 is an amazing aeroplane, and you know, the reputation, it's nicknamed the Plastic Fantastic, and it's a magnificent aeroplane.
And we're just seeing that the weather conditions were stable and clear when this crash occurred. Surface winds were light, visibility was 6 kilometres, no indications of wind shear, storms or other adverse conditions, according to another flight safety expert speaking to the BBC. Give us a sense, if you would, Jeffrey, then, of how this investigation is going to work, both from the perspective of the civil aviation authorities there in India and Boeing as well.
So the people who are party to the investigation are obviously led by the Indian authorities. Then the NTSB of America, the National Transportation Safety Board, is involved. General Electric is involved, the engine maker. Also Boeing, of course, is involved. Any other relevant major suppliers to the aircraft type will be involved. And, of course, Air India will be involved. So it'll be a multi-party, multidisciplined investigation. And the cockpit voice recorder and the digital flight data recorder, the Indian authorities will either send them to France or to the United States to be transcribed. That's typically what will happen. And within 30 days, they have to give a preliminary report, and that preliminary report may say nothing more than the plane crashed. But a lengthy investigation will follow, which may take 1 or 2, maybe even 3 years to really drill down to exactly what the issue was, if it's not something that sort of jumps out at them straight away. from the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder. And of course, we don't know who survived the crash. And if the pilots did survive, then obviously the investigation would probably be a lot more speedy.
And there are reports, Jeffrey, of people being stretchered away and treated in hospital. I mean, we don't have any more details. We don't know exactly what that means. I suppose the blunt question here is, if a plane crashes very quickly after takeoff, before it has gained significant altitude, what are the chances of surviving something like that?
Well, one of the problems with this particular crash is that, as you have said, it was going to London Gatwick. It probably had about 140 tonnes of fuel on board. There was a massive explosion. Now, having said that, we don't have vision yet of exactly the impact, and it may well be that the wings ripped away from the fuselage, and most of the fuel is in the wings, and the fuselage catapulted forward. Now, we saw that in the United States, that Delta Airlines accident, where the wings ripped away and the fuselage skidded forward and everybody walked away from the accident. Unfortunately, in this case, I don't think that will be the case. But if the fuselage did propel forward away from the explosion, then there's a very good chance that the survival rate will be much higher.
And Jeffrey, I'd be grateful if you would just stay with us for a second while I bring our audience up to date with a few more developments. The UK Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has been speaking and saying that the scenes emerging of a London-bound plane carrying many British nationals crashing in the Indian city of Ahmedabad are devastating, adding that he was being kept updated as the situation evolves. And we're also told that the UK is working with the Indian authorities to urgently establish the facts and provide support to those involved, those affected. In terms of what was affected on the ground, this civilian area affected by the plane crash, a senior police officer in Ahmedabad telling a local news agency that the London-bound plane crashed into a doctor's hostel. He says that police, firefighters, other civic workers reached the spot within minutes. Rescue operations are still underway, and certainly we've been showing images of firefighters working to douse flames alongside charred buildings and charred trees in this civilian area. Still with us from Perth, aviation expert Jeffrey Thomas. Jeffrey, I know that you are looking across all of the contacts, all of the sources that you have at the moment. What other news are you hearing about this crash?
Look, it's a scene of total confusion and chaos, as one would expect. You've got a very heavily built-up area. You've got a large aircraft, a wide-bodied aircraft, 242 passengers and probably about 11 or 12 crew, crashing into a suburban area, as you mentioned, a doctor's hostel. It's just bedlam, a tragic bedlam, and hopefully we get survivors. Hopefully we get a lot of survivors from this. This is a savage blow to Air India. It's a tragedy for those involved, and of course also it's a very, very bad news for the aviation industry, because any crash is a tragedy, it's really a sad day.
And Jeffrey, for anyone who's just joining us, I want to get you to recap your initial assessment, your initial thoughts on what might have happened. And we do stress that this is an initial opinion because there is a lot of detail that we still don't have. But you told me at the beginning of our conversation that when you looked at images of the plane, it looked as if it was coming into land rather than taking off, which is what it was doing. And just run us through your explanation, your thoughts on that particular point once more, if you would.
Certainly. Well, typically on a takeoff, the undercarriage is retracted within 10 to 15 seconds of takeoff. as soon as you have positive climb, you retract the undercarriage. However, the flaps, which are a take-off setting of flaps and slats to assist lift to get you airborne, they are retracted slowly over a period of 10 to 15 minutes or so as the aircraft gains speed and altitude. What we've seen here is 1 minute after takeoff and just before impact, the undercarriage is still down and the flaps appear, from the vision that I have seen, they appear to have been retracted. Now, there's a possibility that instead of retracting the undercarriage, the crew have retracted the flaps. It has happened before. It happened in the United Kingdom, British European Airways, a BEA Trident taking off from Heathrow. In the industry, it's simply called Papa India. That's the last two initials of the registration of the aircraft. The flaps were retracted and not the undercarriage, and that caused a terrible tragedy just around Heathrow. So it has happened before. It certainly shouldn't happen, obviously, but that's when I saw the vision, I thought, that's weird. The undercarriage is down. It looks like it's coming into land, and I looked at the wing setting, and the wings look clean, which means the flaps have been retracted.
And that, just briefly, would, if the flaps were retracted very quickly, that would reduce the lift, yes.
It reduces the lift, and basically you've got to have them for takeoff. And if you don't have them set for takeoff, then you're in trouble.
Geoffrey Thomas, aviation expert, very grateful for your time today and talking through your initial reactions to what you have seen of this crash. You are with us here on BBC News. Let me just bring you up to date with a couple of reactions. We are told that here in the UK, Buckingham Palace says that King Charles is being kept updated on the crash in India. And also the Prime Minister here in the UK, Sir Keir Starmer, says the scenes emerging of a London-bound plane carrying many British nationals crashing in the Indian city of Ahmedabad are devastating, adding that he was being kept updated as the situation develops. And we know that the UK government has promised to do all it can, working with the Indian authorities to urgently establish the facts and also to support all of those involved and affected. Now, with more on this, I'm joined by Merlin Thomas from BBC Verify. Merlin, hello to you. I know that you have been looking at footage from the area. What do you have for us?
Here at BBC Verify, we're examining videos circulating on social media to piece together the moments before a London-bound Air India jet crashed shortly after takeoff. Now, we're still looking into this video, which appears to show the plane moments before the crash. Now, we're not showing you the moment of impact, but you can see it crashing just after, and we've cut that video just there. Now, we've geolocated this video, which shows a large plume of smoke rising into the sky. Now, Ahmedabad is a large city in the state of Gujarat, the home state of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Now, the video was filmed here, not far from Ahmedabad's airport. Now, we don't yet know the exact crash site, but we have this data from the flight tracking website Flight Radar 24. The Boeing 7878 Dreemliner took off from Ahmedabad Airport at 13:38 local time, heading for London Gatwick. Now, reports say there were more than 200 people on board. In this image, you can see how the plane moved to the end of the runway, and flight tracking data ends with the plane at an altitude of 625 feet. Then, Flight Radar 24 said it started to descend with a vertical speed of around 475 feet per minute. An aviation expert told BBC Verify that the weather forecast at the time was stable and clear at the time of the departure of the flight. Now, we've also geolocated this video where you can also see that large dark plume of smoke rising into the sky. We haven't yet seen any air traffic control recordings or live transmissions yet, but at BBC Verify, we'll be piecing together those videos to understand the details of what happened and bring you the latest.
OK, Merlin, thank you very much. Merlin Thomas from BBC Verify. And joining me now in the studio are correspondent Rich Preston. Rich, I think it might be useful just to recap what we know in terms of how many people were on board this aircraft and what we know about them.
Yeah, so some conflicting information about the exact numbers. What we do know is that there were 256 seats on this plane, specifically 18 in business class and 238 in standard class. Now, the number that we've been hearing is 242. That's come to us from various sources, but we have heard a few different figures, but around that number, we can pretty confidently say at least 240 people on board, most of them Indian nationals. The figure that we've been given there is 169 Indian